So what is better, residential property or commercial property? What makes a better investment? This is a fantastic question. Now, we personally only actually invest in residential property. We don't invest in commercial property, so I'm already a little bit biased. What actually am I? Let me explain. So we invest in residential property. That tends to be regular family houses. It tends to be those that generate a really good income, for example, HMOs, short stay. That's really our core portfolio because we're interested in holding property that generates a really good, healthy income. And then we'll develop residential property and we'll sell it on, i.e. we don't tenant it, we just sell it on as a home or flip property. That tends to be our core strategies in terms of what we're doing. Now, when we are thinking about what type of investment we want, ultimately the things that are important for us is where's the location of that property, what's the long-term potential capital growth that's going to happen on that property, what income it's going to generate for us, how much money are we going to potentially tie up in that, what's the return on investment going to be. These are all really the factors that we're thinking about. And if you're using bank finance, there's a lot of regulation that we need to think about as well. For example, mortgages, what the criteria might be there, or if you're remortgaging, all of these things that we need to consider when we're looking at residential property. When it comes to commercial property, as I said, this is something we don't actually do, but it doesn't mean we don't want to do it. I'm becoming more and more open to the idea of investing in commercial, and I'm talking about pure commercial. What I mean by that is, for example, it might be an office building, it might be a retail store like a shop, it could be an industrial warehouse building. All of these are commercial. They have no aspect of where somebody lives in that property as their home. So it's just used for commercial and business purposes. So the advantage of commercial tenants over, say, residential tenants is once a tenant's moved into a property, normally they take on most of the responsibility of maintaining that property. You may have heard of FRI leases, which is a full repairing and insuring, means the responsibility of repairing and insuring that building also goes to the tenant. Whereas in residential property, that doesn't happen. It's still the landlord's problem. So generally, you don't need to deal with the tenant on a day-to-day basis. Rent is often paid quarterly in advance, meaning that actually there's not that much communication between the landlord and the tenant. And often the leases are quite long, like 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 20 years even in some cases. So this then also means if there's actually not that much interaction and involvement between the landlord and the tenant, the property could be anywhere in the country. So for us right now, residential investments are primarily in the West Midlands. That's where we invest, that's where we work. But if there were commercial properties and we had, say, Co-op as a tenant, and it was in Manchester, it make no difference to us in terms of the location because we're not going to have day-to-day dealings with that particular tenant. It means they look after the property, the rent's paid quarterly in advance as well. Now, when it comes to commercial property, if you're taking on a vacant building and then you're putting a tenant in that building, the income it generates, normally that's how that property is valued. So it's based on what's the income being generated from that property, whereas residential property tends to be more bricks and mortar, i.e. the location primarily drives the value of that property, which commercial valuations are done in a completely different way. So that also opens up the opportunity to take on, for example, an old commercial building that has fairly low value, to improve that, put a good tenant in there, somebody that is a big national brand that will pay a great rent, unlikely to default on that rent, and then that really drives up the value of that particular property, meaning it appeals as an investment to many people. For some of the reasons I mentioned earlier on, it could be based anywhere in the country, you don't really have interaction or engagement with the tenant on a daily basis. However, some of the downsides of commercial property is when the property is unoccupied, if you're going to be using finance to be able to, say bank finance to purchase it, the lenders tend not to like that type of building because it's not generating any income. So often you're having to purchase it for cash. So if you've got a commercial building, you're purchasing for cash. And then finding a tenant for that property can sometimes be more challenging than finding a tenant for a residential property. So let's say you had a 3-bedroom family house and you needed to find a tenant. And let's say it took a month. That would not be unusual or massively uncomfortable for the landlord if that was the case. On a commercial property, you maybe have seen this yourself sometimes, a building could be empty for a year or so before they found the right tenant to move into that property. And during that time, you've got to look after the property, the upkeep, and you've got business rates to consider as well. So there's ups and downs on both on residential and commercial property. Which is the better strategy really depends on what your longer term objective is. As I said, we primarily do residential. I'm keen to do more commercial only. So watch this space as I share with you as we start doing some of those projects. Hey, if you're enjoying these Saj daily videos, then what I'd like you to do is click on my face over here to subscribe to the channel, and also click on the bell in order to get the notifications when these videos are being released. Then what to do next is click on this video here, and I'll see you over here on this video next.